As an undergrad, I worked in the chapel at VU, and my senior year, it was downstairs in the office that's sort of underneath the big chancel area, and I must have given off some sort of nervous energy, because as I graduated and received a kind gift from the staff there, the campus pastor had chosen for me in very large print a framed "Be Still and Know That I Am God." So there must have been something about the way I presented myself that he thought this was really what I needed to hear and to have up on my wall and hear daily. And that text has always been really special to me. And so when we all got to speak those words in the psalm today, I was really pleased to hear it. This is one of those psalms that we look forward to in worship. We actually have it assigned twice in this year. We heard it both on Reformation just a few weeks ago, and now again here on Christ the King Sunday. We're getting to that time of year where we need a little bit of stillness. We have come to treasure in this congregation our Advent worship, which is quiet, with candles, and, lights are dim. In the time where the world says, go, 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 we can take 25 minutes and stop. And that is a treasure. And even more so, I think, for myself in this season of our life together as a country, as we are overwhelmed by how far apart our differences seem to pull us, as we are maybe even overwhelmed by the piling on of words of people trying to make sense of everything, an invitation to be still sounds pretty good. But as I read through the psalm again and listened again to its words, I realized that this is probably not the kind of be still where you're sitting on a porch swing looking at a lake and watching the leaves fall. The context for this verse is God stepping out into the middle of a battlefield. And this is really, I think, God using that mom voice. I don't know how good mine is. My mother's was excellent, so that when you heard the words, knock it off, you did, right? You sat up straighter. You waited to see if it was going to stop there, please, or if there might be some further invitation to change what is going on. And this is what's happening in the psalm. God is using that mom voice, that voice that makes the earth melt, walking out into the middle of the mess that we're making and saying, stop it. And we all know that need for boundaries, right? I think that's the other reason we love this psalm. The be still bit is great, and I pray over that often. But this reminder that God has boundaries that God can keep is good news. We may know infants who don't sleep well unless they are practically tied up. We had one that especially, not just kind of swaddled a little bit, but swaddled like you meant it, or there was going to be no sleep for anyone in the household. Because that feels safe to know that there are boundaries. And as children get older, maybe we've had this experience with someone else's toddler who is suddenly in our care, and they would very much like to know, are there still rules? Does your no mean no the way that my mom's no means no? Right? And so they're going to push at every little opportunity until they figure out that there are walls. And if, for some reason, children don't find them in whatever care situation, they fall apart. It's terrifying and terrible. And when there are boundaries is when they feel safe. And we do it when we are older, when we are adolescents, we do it in adulthood, we do it in relationships that we've had for decades. I'm just going to push it a little further in this argument this time, and even this isn't our rational thought. I'm going to push it a little further to see if you still care enough to make this work together, right? Still care enough to figure out how we mend this relationship. We crave knowing that there are some boundaries and some limits, because we know that we are going to kill ourselves if there aren't, right? We are out there on that battlefield, destructive without wanting to be, maybe, in our families, destructive in our communities, in our world. We are destructive in the way we talk to our own selves, aren't we? And so we hang on to this psalm because we hunger to hear it. We hunger to hear God's mom voice that can create immediate action. And we just want to see her come and snap that bow over her knee, don't we? And that spear, and light those shields on fire. Make it stop. It's good to know that what is ultimate to us, what brings death and destruction, is just kindling to God. And so on this Christ the King Sunday, we remember that God's will does indeed involve righting everything that we cannot put right ourselves. Which is why this poetry in Colossians is so beautiful. This language of Jesus as the image of the invisible God. The Greek word there is icon. And maybe when you close your eyes and think of an icon, you see a very lovingly, prayerfully painted image of a saint with gold leaf on it, and maybe there's some candles lit underneath it. But I am just young enough that the first experience I had with the word icon was when the Apple Macintosh moved into the living room, the first computer we ever had, and there were little icons. And you double click on the icon and it takes you to Turbo Turtle or to, there were about 3 things you could do. That was it. But that little icon isn't just a picture, is it? It connects you to and sort of contains the whole thing, so that on my phone, when I click on that little icon of a phone handset that no telephone looks like anymore, in fact, but phone handset, it takes me immediately to the ability to speak with my mother. Right? So it connects me with the bigger piece. And that's what icons that are supposed to be used in worship are supposed to be doing too, connecting us with the bigger piece. And so Jesus is the image, the icon of the invisible God, connecting us to that full reality. The connection with the God who can stop the world with that voice, whose power and authority steps into our battlefields and snaps the things we want to smite each other with. In him, the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. All the power that it took to create the world, all the power to set things right with a word, all there in Jesus. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him God was pleased to reconcile to himself all things, whether in earth or in heaven, by making peace through the blood of his cross. And so that's the only story we could possibly tell on this Christ the King Sunday about Jesus. The only story we could tell is the most important story, the story where Jesus reigns as king. Jesus, who from the first step of his path to the cross has spoken with a voice of authority. The very first words he says, everyone says, "Oh, who is this?" Jesus, whose words again and again cause everyone to pull up short and to catch a glimpse of God's kingdom. And sometimes they love it, and sometimes they say, "This guy's crazy. He does everything backwards." This is Jesus who at every turn of the path stopped to put right something that seemed final to us. The blind can see again. Women who are bleeding and bent return to their lives and their communities. Demons take their marching orders and go. Here is Jesus, God stepping bodily onto our battlefield into the middle of all of our destructiveness and walking up to one of those instruments of death that we love so much, and I want to see him snap it over his knee. And he doesn't do that. In him, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell bodily, and Jesus walks up to this instrument of death and says, "Father, forgive." And when Jesus allows this crucifixion, everything in heaven and on earth shifts. This cross is where God's reign, God's kingdom is made completely clear for all of us. This is what our King does to make everything right. This is how God deals with the sin that we marinate in, all the pain and death that we like to hand out to one another or that ambushes us when we're least expecting it. This is what leadership and love look like. There's a reading from Jeremiah assigned for today that we didn't read, but in it, God is frustrated as all get out with the leaders of God's people because they can't get it right. And God says, I'm going to have to do it myself. I am going to have to do it myself. I am going to have to do what you cannot do. And God does it not by bombing us back into the Stone Age, not by threatening us into submission, not by yelling the loudest, but by sitting down and joining us in the hells that we create, suffering alongside the people that we are crucifying, dying the death that has been hanging over my head and over your head since the day we were born. In Jesus, our King, God has spoken a final word to us, and God has spoken a final word to sin and to death. Enough. Be still. Jesus' death and resurrection gut the powers of the world and show them for what they are. In the context of his love, they are nothing. God opens up an entirely new way of being. And so our invitation this morning is to wonder. Maybe to knock it off, and then to wonder. Wonder at a king who would do such a thing. Wonder what on earth it might mean to follow him. And wonder what it might mean to be claimed as his children. So let's listen one more time and wonder. When they came to the place that is called the skull, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And they cast lots to divide his clothing. And the people stood by, watching. The leaders scoffed at him, saying, He saved others. Let him also save himself if he is the Messiah of God, his chosen one. The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine, saying, If you're king of the Jews, save yourself. There was also an inscription over him. This is the King of the Jews. One of the criminals who were hanged there kept deriding him, saying, Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us. But the other rebuked him. Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation, and we indeed have been condemned justly? We are getting what we deserve for our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus replied, Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise.